You know that moment when a room suddenly feels smaller. Someone starts whispering about a person who isn't here. Eyes narrow, voices drop. Everyone leans in a little too eagerly. And you don't want to join. You don't like talking about people behind their backs. But you also don't want to look stiff, strange, or too serious. So you smile, or stay quiet, or pretend not to hear. And in that 1 second of silence, something inside you whispers, "Why am I even here? Why does this feel wrong?" Nietzsche once said, "He who fights with monsters should see to it that he does not become a monster." He wasn't talking about gossip, but the warning fits perfectly. Because every time you stand near small, petty talk, you feel yourself shrinking too. Today, we're going to talk about that. Not as a list of techniques, not as steps you must take, but as a way to see clearly, stand firmly and rise above a psychological game that most people don't even know they're playing. Keep watching, because the next point is where most people finally wake up. Part 1. The silent psychology of gossip. Why they need it. Let's start with a truth most people never consider. Gossip is never about the person being talked about. It's about the people doing the talking. They gossip because it gives them power without effort. Because it's easier to point at someone else's flaws than face their own. Because insecurity prefers company. Nietzsche warned long ago, most people are much too concerned with the opinion of others. That's why they gossip. To feel less small. To feel less unseen. To feel like they're on the stronger side of the story. And when you stand there, even silent, they assume you share their weakness. They assume you agree. They assume you're one of them. Psychologically, there's something darker happening. People who gossip are terrified of becoming the next target. So they pull others into the conversation for protection. Not to inform you, not to share, but to feel safe behind a group. Gossip is a fragile shield, a cheap kind of courage. Behind every whispered insult is someone trying not to drown in their own insecurity. Later in this video, I'll reveal a subtle psychological sign that shows you've become a threat. Not to the person being gossiped about, but to the gossiper themselves. It's something almost no one notices. Part 2. The real reason you feel uneasy, and the hidden cost you never see. You might think you dislike gossip because you're nice, or moral, or simply uninterested in drama. But that's not the real reason. The truth is simple. Gossip breaks your alignment with yourself. You're standing there while they dissect someone else's life, and a quiet voice inside you whispers, "This isn't who I am. This energy feels heavy. This isn't my level." That discomfort isn't morality. It's intuition, what Nietzsche called the quiet voice of a strong soul. We only feel uneasy around things that weaken us. And gossip always weakens you, even when you stay silent. Psychology calls this cognitive dissonance, the inner tension, when your values and your environment don't match. Your principles say one thing, your presence says another. And that mismatch leaves you feeling drained, even though you barely spoke a word. But here's the part nobody tells you. That small discomfort. It's also a warning of what you're losing without noticing. Because when you sit near gossip, even silently you lose value. Not publicly, not socially, but in the quiet, subconscious judgment of the very people doing the gossiping. You become easy to fool. If you listen once, they assume you'll listen again, and next time, they'll push further. You become a safe target. Gossipers always need new victims, and the quiet listener is the easiest one. If you tolerate hearing it, they assume you'll tolerate being the subject of it. You become a person without a stance. People may like you, but they won't respect you, because respect isn't built on agreeing, it's built on boundaries. Nietzsche warned. the lonely one offers his hand too quickly to anyone he meets. And that's exactly what happens here. You stand in small rooms with small conversations to avoid small discomforts, and the price you pay is your own identity. Because every gossip circle is a tiny abyss, and the longer you stand near it, the more it stares back into you. In the next section, I'll explain why the weaker a person is inside, the more they feel the need to involve you in gossip, and why your quiet presence actually threatens them. Part 3. The true reason they want you involved. Here's something strange but true. Gossipers always need witnesses. Without an audience, their negativity loses its power. Their complaints lose their weight. Their insecurities lose their armor. That's why they look at you while telling their stories. That's why they wait for your reaction. That's why they push for it. You know what I mean, right? Did you hear about this? Can you believe she did that? In psychology, this is called triangulation, creating false alliances to validate their feelings. But here's the deeper Nietzsche truth. Weak people need allies. Strong people need only the truth. If your presence is calm, grounded, quiet, you become threatening. Not because you judged them, not because you disagreed, but because you didn't match their energy. People who rely on gossip cannot stand people who rely on strength. Your silence exposes their insecurity, so they try harder to pull you in, to get you to agree, to make you one of them. Not because the story is important, but because their ego feels safer if you nod. Part 4. Why your strength threatens them, and what IT reveals about you. You've probably had this thought before, the quiet, anxious one you never say out loud. If I don't join their conversation, will I be left out? Will they think I'm stiff, too serious, not fun enough? So at some point you tried. You joined the story. You smiled. You responded. You played along just enough to blend in. But afterward, you didn't feel included. You didn't feel connected. You didn't feel closer to anyone in that circle. You felt worse, heavier, disconnected from yourself, like you had lowered your own standard just to match a room you didn't even want to be in. And here is the part people never realize. That awful feeling you get after participating. It's not a bad sign. It's proof you're built for a higher level. People who belong in gossip circles feel energized by them. You walked away feeling drained because what you did was beneath who you are. That discomfort is a signal, a message, an inner compass pointing upward. This isn't your frequency. This isn't where you belong. This is below your level now. And once you see this clearly, everything else in this section makes perfect sense. There's something you need to understand about yourself, something you probably never noticed. You wouldn't feel uneasy around gossip if you weren't built for more. People who thrive on chaos feel comfortable in chaos. People who depend on judgment feel at home in judgment. People who lack depth cling to shallow conversations. But you feel the discomfort because your nature is different. Your quietness reads as depth. Your stillness reads as power. Your boundaries, even unspoken, read as confidence. And insecure people can sense that instantly. That's why they keep pulling you in. Not because they value your opinion, but because they need to neutralize the pressure your presence creates. To them, your silence feels like a mirror. It reflects their pettiness back at them. It exposes the smallness of what they're doing. And they can't stand it. So they try to drag you down to their level, because if you stand above it, they feel even smaller. Nietzsche once wrote, "Whoever fights you fights that which he does not have." Gossipers don't fight you with insults. They fight you with invitations. Invitations to join in. Invitations to nod. Invitations to be part of the group. Because once you join them, their insecurity has company. Their weakness feels less obvious. and the pressure of your presence disappears. But here's the awakening moment. Their need to involve you isn't a sign of their influence. It's a sign of yours. Your refusal, even silent, even subtle, proves you have something they don't. Self-respect, self-control, internal power. That's why you feel different. That's why the room feels smaller. That's why your intuition whispers, "This isn't my place." Your discomfort is not a flaw. It's the first symptom of outgrowing people who aren't growing at all. And once you understand this, something inside you shifts forever. But here's the twist most people never realize. The real danger of gossip isn't what it does to your reputation. It's what it quietly trains your mind to tolerate. And that brings us to something even more important. Part 5. How to rise above without being awkward or self-righteous. Let's make something clear. You don't need dramatic exits. You don't need angry lectures. You don't need to call out anyone. Strength doesn't perform. Strength adjusts the environment simply by existing. So here's how you rise above, subtly, naturally, without turning the room against you. Tip 1. You shift your posture. The body speaks before the mouth does. Lean back. Relax your shoulders. Stop giving your energy forward. That tiny change signals, "I'm not entering this," and people feel it. Tip 2. You don't add, but you don't reward. You don't say, "That's terrible. She's awful. I can't believe it." You simply let their words pass through you like wind through a hallway. A nod is too much. A laugh is too much. Neutrality is your shield. Tip 3. You redirect not defensively, but effortlessly. You don't say, "Let's not talk about her." That sounds moral, and moral talk invites resistance. Instead, you shift the spotlight. Speaking of that, did you finish that project? By the way, how's your week been? You mentioned something earlier. You don't fight the energy. You override it. Tip 4. You let silence do the work. Silence is uncomfortable for gossipers. It forces them to face their own words. It steals the oxygen from their fire. A 3-second pause can collapse an entire gossip circle. Tip 5. You leave gracefully. Not with irritation. Not with moral superiority. Just with intention. "All right, I'm gonna grab a drink. I need to make a quick call. I'll catch up with you in a second." Soft exits. Clean boundaries. High status. Nietzsche said, "Silence is worse." All truths that are kept silent become poisonous. But here's the twist. Silence used wisely isn't poison, it's power. It's how you separate yourself without saying a single word. Part 6. The truth about gossipers and the person you're becoming. People will never say this out loud, but when gossipers are around you, something shifts inside them. They feel watched not because you judge them, but because your presence quietly reminds them that they're doing something beneath themselves. Your energy raises the standard of the room, and they become aware of it. They feel insecure because you're not listening eagerly like they expect. You're not feeding the fire. And without your reaction, their entire performance loses momentum. They feel exposed because weakness hates being seen. And your calm, steady presence sees everything. That's why they try to pull you in, not to include you, but to disarm you. If they can make you join, your strength becomes harmless to them. But here's the shift. The moment you recognize this dynamic, you stop feeling awkward and start feeling sovereign, because a strong soul behaves differently. It doesn't shrink in small rooms. It doesn't absorb small talk. It doesn't become the energy around it. It simply remains itself. A strong soul listens with compassion, but stays untouched. It's present, but not involved. It can see everything, yet doesn't react to anything. your presence becomes a filter. People stop gossiping when you walk in, not out of fear, but because pettiness feels embarrassing in your atmosphere. This is what Nietzsche meant by, become who you are. And who you are is not someone who joins the noise, matches the chaos, or betrays your own alignment to fit into small conversations. You are someone who rises quietly, naturally, effortlessly. Someone who shows, simply by existing, that small talk cannot hold a strong person. And once you finally see yourself this way, gossip stops being something you fear because you realize gossipers never had the power to weaken you. They only revealed the strength you were too humble to claim. The power of walking away from smallness. At some point in your life, you have to decide what kind of person you want to be in a world full of noise. You can be the one who bends just to belong, who laughs at things that don't feel right, who joins conversations that make you feel smaller afterward. You've tried that. We all have. And you know exactly what it feels like afterward, that quiet sting in your chest, that uncomfortable voice whispering, "This isn't you." Or, you can be the person who chooses yourself, even when the room pulls you in the opposite direction. Because there comes a moment, subtle, silent, easy to miss, where you finally understand. You weren't meant to operate at the level where gossip lives. Your discomfort wasn't a weakness. It was a compass, a signal, a sign pointing upward. You don't feel right in those conversations because deep down, your soul is already outgrowing them. You are stretching into a higher version of yourself that no longer fits into small talk, petty judgment, or the empty thrill of talking about people who aren't even in the room.